All right, everyone. I'm the metaphysical philosophy bro for the purposes of this video, and I'm going to talk about metaphysics and my book by the philosopher Henri Bergson, who's a French philosopher who I heard about because his thoughts on metaphysics and other subjects inspired Deleuze, who is a famous philosopher who I heard about his work from Foucault, the post-structuralist philosopher who I like and often talk about, and who public intellectuals often strawman. So I heard about Deleuze from Foucault, and I heard about Henri Bergson in my learning about Deleuze. And Henri Bergson, he had some very, like I said, he had some very interesting thoughts on metaphysics in particular. And I made a video before about the first paragraph that I discussed, so check that out as well. And I will get into the paragraphs here that I will read on this subject about how reality is always changing, because going back into even ancient Greek philosophy and the pre-Socratics even, and probably going back to the dawn of human history or the dawn of human existence, even people have thought that reality is static and unchanging, and some people still act like that today, like as if people's natures are static and unchanging. The nature of men and women, the nature of black people and white people, the nature of conservatives and liberals, that sort of shit, right? So anyway, okay, so there is a reality that, oh wait, this is from the first one, so this is good to know, to go from there in this paragraph here. There is a reality that is external and yet given immediately to the mind. Common sense is right on this point, as against the idealism and realism of philosophers. So this is interesting because he's saying the reality is external and yet given immediately to the mind. The realists, in terms of metaphysics, tend to believe that reality is external and the like only external, not given immediately to the mind. There is a separate reality, regardless of whether we exist or not, somewhere out there that we can grab onto that objectively exists. And then in terms of idealists, when we're talking about metaphysics, they talk about reality be giving immediately to the mind, because all that exists is our mind and our consciousness, and we cannot know whether anything actually exists objectively or not. So going from there to here in this next paragraph, this reality is mobility, not things made, but things in the making, not self-maintaining states, but only changing states exist. So I think that's really interesting and important to understand too, because a lot of people know nowadays that the reality is always changing. We know that from a lot of science. It's not that the universe and the sky is static and the stars are all static and immovable, and the sun and the moon and all the other planets and that. And we know that the universe was created with a big bang, and stars are exploding and reforming all the time in an endless process since the big bang, to the creation, through the creation of the earth, through evolution to our existence, to the progression of technology, to me talking about metaphysics right now on YouTube. And like I said, we have to remember this in terms of human beings and human civilization too. Like a lot of conservatives, for example, claim that monogamy and marriage between a man and woman has been, basically, this is just in human nature and it's been this way forever, whereas in reality, this monogamy between a man and a woman for the sole purposes of procreation is actually a very historically recent thing in terms of human history. Maybe a few thousand years, maybe longer than that, but it wasn't a major thing for the majority of human history and human existence. And like I said, people think that men and women are so different and always changing, and there certainly are differences. That's not to be discounted, but there are, like, men and women are really similar too, and there are more. Even Jordan Peterson used to say this: more differences between individuals within certain groups than there are differences between different entire groups of people. So, for example, difference there are more differences between the individual black people than there are between black people and white people, for example. And you could say this about political tribalism too. Like, hardcore lefties think any conservative is inherently evil and dumb, basically, and then hardcore conservatives think that any hardcore lefties are inherently hardcore, evil, and dumb, right? But these people can change. Uh, our political opinions change. We can change our gender. We can't change our sex, of course, or genitals, but we can decide whether someone refers to us as a man or a woman. You can decide that you're a dragon if you want to. And uh, what else? I guess you can't change your race, but in terms of race in general, it's a social construct, and people often strawman that concept and say that social construct means it has no biological reality, which James Lindsay here does all the fucking time. And oh, you know what? I just realized I am using the I'm using the wrong thumbnail here. So I'm going to put the right one here. This is my thumbnail for a different video. Anyway, yeah, in terms of, I interrupted myself. In terms of race, for example, um, if we're talking about race, right? I was saying race is a social construct, but that doesn't mean that it has no biological reality. It just means that there that this concept of race, we all agreed that uh, we all agree that there's this concept called race, and there's these different races, black and white, whereas in reality humans started as one species, and then for like 5 million years or something, humans all evolved in Africa, so we were all black or African at some point, and then we evolved from there into different races, and then, well, like I said, we decided on these things called races, and for most of human history there was discrimination, but it was more based on culture and geographical location. Like, these Romans they're terrible and they rape their children, or those Greeks are boy lovers, or some shit like that, right? And it's so the race, for example, humans used to all be one race. We still are one race. It's just a way to differentiate between all of us physically. And I think that race is mostly a useless concept. I think that I'm not a race abolitionist personally, but I think that it's mostly a useless concept and seeks to only divide people. But it is useful to know for certain diseases. For example, like, black people apparently have a much higher chance of getting sickle cell anemia than white people do, and then that's why you should, I mean, the differences between men and women are more significant than the or than the differences between different races of people, but there are still differences and similarities. Anyway, went on to a bit of a tangent there. So, like I said, this reality is mobility, not things made, but things in the making. So it's not that these things they're just made and they're static and unchanging, right? It's a endless process of change. Things things are being made and then changing, and then there's not a point at which these things are done being made and then get destroyed, and then another thing gets made. Although you could say, like, a star destroys and then its ingredients create another star, but that depends on how you describe it and how you define it, right? If the ingredients from the star create another star, is it really a new star? And we can get into all this that has gone throughout through philosophy throughout human history, like the ship of Theseus, which I think is a famous example from Heraclitus, the ancient Greek philosopher, talking about this ship that existed for a long period of time, and eventually it got more and more parts replaced until it had no original parts from the original boat. So in that case, uh, is that still the same boat? Is the boat in name, but it has none of the original parts? And then there's the of course, this is an anachronism. If you step in a river, you're never stepping in the same river because the water is moved all around and it's not the same water. So this is an interesting subject too. It's if things are changing, are they are they always so similar? Are they different? If like a person, people always change from the time we're babies. We change physically, emotionally, psychologically due to our upbringing and our culture and whatnot. And we have different opinions and stuff. And we may be completely different people from the time we die in comparison to the time we're born, but we're still the same human being that came out of our mother's vaginas. And but we've just same. So in some ways we're the same, but in some ways we're a completely different person. It depends on how you look at it, right? But that's just the nature of change. It's complicated. So not things made, but things in the making. Not self-maintaining states, but only changing states exist. So not this steady state model of the universe where nothing is moving and all the stars and planets and suns and shit are are fixed. And it's like these states are always changing. Like I was saying, stars are exploding, and then the ingredients are creating new stars. The same with planets. Our moon, for example, used to be a piece of the earth. And like I was saying, if we're talking about people change, reality changes, culture changes, gender differences change, races change, evolution changes, reality changes. But only changing states exist. Rest is never more apparent, or rather relative. Um, Rest is relative. If everything is always changing and moving, then it's more apparent when it stops, because things are always changing, but they're not always necessarily moving because they can change without necessarily moving. I guess you could talk an example of that would be our thoughts and our opinions and our psychological states, right? But you could probably say that about some sort of physical object, although I'm not sure. I haven't thought about it that much. Rest is never more than apparent, or rather relative. The consciousness we have of our own self in its continual flux introduces us to the interior of a reality on the model of which we must represent other realities. Let me say this again. The consciousness we have of our own self in its continual flux. So our self is in continual flux, continuously changing, like I said. And this introduces us to the interior of all reality. So our constantly changing consciousness introduces us to the interior of all reality, um, on the model of which we must represent all other realities. So the model that our consciousness, our conscious, or I guess I should say self consciousness, the model of our self consciousness continuously changing is the model in which we must represent all other. Okay, so wait, I should say this better. The uh, Our constantly changing self consciousness introduces us to the interior of a reality, and the model of our constantly changing consciousness of ourself showing us the interior of reality is the model on which we must represent all other realities. It makes sense, right? That's the template for which you uh, describe and define all different realities, if we're assuming that there are multiple different realities. But I'm not sure that's what he refers to here because it's metaphysics, not physics. Anyway, all reality, therefore, is tendency. So there are tendencies, but they're not constant, steady, static states. and physical things and emotional, psychological thing and intellectual things, they're tendencies. They're not static states either, because ideas are always changing too, right? And our thoughts. So all reality, therefore, is tendency. If we agree to mean by tendency an incipient change of direction. So reality is only a tendency, and it's always changing directions. So like I said, reality is always changing. It's a tendency, it's always changing, and it's always moving. There are no inherent static states that never change. There is never stillness. Things are constantly moving. Right. So, yeah, I think I've talked about that enough. Anyway, yeah, reality is always changing and moving, and there are no static steady states. There are only tendencies. So yes, reality is always changing, and this is important to think about, both like in terms of metaphysics, but other aspects of philosophy and psychology and ideas like that too. Our physical bodies, physical reality, and psychological reality, all of those examples that I used, right? All right. Anyway, yeah. Thanks everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed this deep dive philosophy video into metaphysics. Make sure that you let me know in the comments what you thought of this video, and I will continue making videos on Henri Bergson's book called Introduction to Metaphysics. And yeah, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. A lot of people watch the videos without subscribing, so please make sure that you do that. Uh, oh yeah, smash the like button, molest it, make sweet love to it, elbow drop it, do whatever you want to do as long as you press the like button. And of course, click the bell to be notified when I come out with new videos. Um, check out this last one on metaphysics. Check out the clip I put out the other day about mine and my friend Dusty's claim that drug cartels are literally the most libertarian corporations in the world. And check out my next clip, which I spoiled a little bit here with James Lindsay talking about groomer schools and woke trans activist teachers and shit like that. So check that out as well. And of course, check out the link for my Patreon page. The link is in the description of the video, as always. And like I always say, most importantly, always remember this: the funk cures all, and groove is in the heart. And metaphysics is a fascinating subject, and reality is always constantly changing, moving, and shifting in different directions, and there are no static steady state ideas, physical states and psychological states in our mind. These things are all always constantly in flux. All right, thanks again everyone. I'm the metaphysical philosophy bro, and adios until next time.